Holy Ghost, Batman, by Amala Run. Chapter 17. Warm plates, cold cutleries. Wayne Manor, main dining room evening. The long mahogany table gleamed under the antique chandelier, polished to near mirror shine. Place settings gleamed with understated silver. The aroma of roasted vegetables, fresh baked bread, and a perfect seasoned roast filled the air like something out of a holiday film. Everything was warm and curated, and somehow still carried the faint tension of a courtroom just before a verdict. Danny tried to sit naturally, but his posture was stiff, too aware of every utensil and crystal water glass. Everything was a little too fancy for someone who'd once fallen asleep in a high school janitor's closet. Danny, on the other hand, sat with her arms crossed and eyes scanning the room, like she was calculating how quickly she could slide under the table if necessary. Tim sat at his right, closest to their family head's seat, shoulders square, radiating calm, or something like it. Stephanie sat to his left, whispering quiet reassurances to Danny, who sat between them and Danny. Sam and Jas sat to his left. Then came a knock at the side door. Alfred moved to open it, without missing a beat, announcing, "Miss Coriander and Miss Marie have arrived." Danny blinked as a woman walked in who looked like a goddess and carried herself like she didn't know it, but was somehow confident you did. Her copper skin shimmered subtly in the candlelight, and her curly hair trailed behind her like a sunset caught in motion. Holding her hand was a bright-eyed girl with equally copper skin, raven black hair, violet eyes, and a mischievous grin. Mari looked like the heir to some kind of fireproof mischief empire, bright, composed, and very interested in the other kids at the table. "Sorry, we're late," Corey said, with a musical accent. Mary had opinions about her shoes. "I wanted boots," the girl huffed. Danny agreed, and Sam smiled approvingly, her feet already hurting from her heels. "You couldn't walk in them," Corey said gently. "I could hover," Dick stood, grinning. Dick stood to greet them, arms open wide, and kissed Corey on the cheek before giving Mari a quick side hug. "You and your mother always make an entrance. Glad you made it. Everyone, this is my daughter, Mari, and her infinitely patient mother, Coriander. Mari, meet your new cousin Danny and his daughter Danny." "Hi," Mari said simply, eyes already drifting towards Danny. Danny gave a tiny wave. "You into sarcasm and highly illegal science projects?" Mari grinned. Corey muttered, "You have no idea." Mari's grin widened, giving Danny a nod. "Wanna swap horror stories about being raised around heroes? Only if yours involve a ghost," Danny said, without missing a beat. The table chuckled at the childish discussion, and places were shifted to make room. Danny didn't think much of it. It was hard not to recognize the Orange Woman as an ex-model and a former member of the Teen Titans. It was awe-inspiring that his Uncle Dick could catch her interest, but he guessed that's what happens when your dad was rich enough to help fund the Justice League. Moments later the noise grew again as another group arrived, this time through the main hall. It was like a parade of color, confidence, and contradiction. Barbara Gordon rolled in first, crisp and understated as always, followed by Cassandra Jane, graceful, posed, and always scanning the room like she'd memorized the seating chart in advance. Kate Kane came next, sharp in a tailored burgundy dress, and gave a nod that felt almost military. Harper Roy slanted in with silver blue hair and a punk formal look only she could pull off, making no effort to tone anything down. Selina Kyle brought up the rear of that group. A short bob haircut and a simple black dress didn't hide that she was stunning. Selina walked over to Bruce like a wild cat, and with a kiss on his cheek sat to his left, just off the table's head. And then, of course, Harley Quinn sauntered in, looking like she owned the manor, holding a bouquet of what looked like fresh basil and mint. "I brought herbs for our ambience," she declared. Behind her, Pamela Isley, who simply looked amused. "That's my fault." Haley blew a kiss at Bruce. Bruce raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Selina rolled her eyes. Alfred, for his part, took the herbs like this was just another Tuesday. They were introduced, welcomed, and seated on the guest side by Jas, while Dick made more room for Barbara's chair besides him. If anyone thought it was weird that Dick and Corey were separated by their daughter, but Barbara sat right beside him, nobody mentioned it. Sam and the Fentons didn't bring it up either, and for a brief, surreal moment, then he forgot he was supposed to be nervous. This wasn't some cool stage. It was a family dinner. A weird one, sure, but it was warm, real. Conversation flowed. Jas and Kate bonded over crime scene psychology. Sam and Cass communicated mostly through shrugs and smirks. They had an eerie conversation and eye rolls. Danny leaned into a growing debate between Maurice and Damien about stealth versus strength. Danny and Mary had already traded 3 inside jokes and a mini glare contest with Damien, who looked like he was calculating the density of their collective energy. Danny, meanwhile, found himself answering the inevitable question, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "So, Danny, what do you want to be when you're older?" Danny blinked at his plate, then smiled faintly. "I always wanted to be an astronaut." That earned a collective "huh" of interest. "Really? Stars, huh?" Carrie asked warmly, with an approving smile, maybe because she was the only real alien present. "Yeah," Danny said, fiddling with the edge of his napkin. "Ever since I was a kid, I used to stay up late, charting constellations and memorizing shuttle stats. I used to sneak out onto the roof to watch the stars with a telescope I built from junkyard parts." Stephanie glanced at him with subtle warmth. "But," Barbara prompted gently. Danny continued, "I had an accident. I've had a heart condition now. Not dangerous day to day, but it rules me out of any official space program." Stephanie glanced at him then, eyes narrowing just slightly, not with suspicion, but with a mother's instinct that something was missing from his words. Still, she said nothing. A gentle silence followed, respectful, unpitying. "That's a shame," said Bruce, finally speaking for the first time in a while. Then he shrugged. "I will find another way. Rocket science isn't exactly exclusive anymore. Maybe I will just build my own rocket someday, DIY style." Across the table, Jason arched a brow. "DIY NASA? Bold." Danny grinned. "Only if I can get Danny to stop rewiring our toaster for propulsion experiments." "She started it," Danny muttered. That got a round of soft laughs. Even Bruce looked faintly amused. But behind the pleasantries something strange was simmering. But beneath the surface of the jokes, something was off. Danny could feel it. So could Danny. It was subtle, like catching the smell of ooze before storm. A kind of presence, not quite ghostly, but adjacent. It stirred when Jason looked their way. It paused when Damien raised his eyes, when Bruce glanced their way, but that was somehow different. Then he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Danny's side glare confirmed it. She felt it too. Something inside those two. Not a core, not a signature, but a faint echo responded to them. It was dormant, nascent, like embers waiting for air. Bruce was just weird, but not too far different from the feeling Corey gave, or Lady Gotham. Across the table, Jason reached for his glass of water a bit too fast. His jaw was tight. Damien sat stiffer than usual, his fingers strumming against his thigh, the motion unusually restless. Neither said a word. They were too trained, too proud, but both were aware of something, and both attributed it sadly to indigestion or tension, or perhaps the vague unease that came from realizing the kid at the center of the table wasn't as ordinary as he seemed. Bruce didn't notice. Dinner continued. Dessert arrived. Chocolate tart, spiced apple crumble, espresso poured, like a ritual. But even as laughter returned and the wine flowed, there was a new gravity in the room, silent, subtle, anchored in the eyes of a boy who once dreamed of the stars, and a strange feeling in the chest of the men watching him back. Bruce had been insistent the Amity Park crew would not spend their week crammed into hotel rooms when Wayne Manor had more space than its current residents could ever use. Alfred, ever the efficient general, had already started preparing a wing of guest rooms before Danny and the others even left for the hotel. The Bad family had dispersed for the night. Dick, Corey, Mary, Barbara, Hopper, Kate, and Jason had all gone back to their homes. Tim and Stephanie had promised they'd return by morning and stay at the manor for at least the week. Pamela and Holly, meanwhile, had decided to impose for the night, citing the long drive back to Metropolis and their lack of flight powers. Bruce hadn't exactly protested, though Alfred's raised eyebrow suggested breakfast would be an event. Back at the hotel, Danny changed quickly, slipping out of his suit and into his more comfortable travel clothes. He folded the tux with unusual care and tucked it into the suit bag. Danny, who had been a non-stop chatterbox on the car ride, bouncing from Gotham skyscrapers to how big the manor was, to how weird Jason seemed in person, had promptly crashed on the hotel bed once Danny started packing. Now she was stretched across his lap, her breathing even, not quite snoring, but close. Danny absentmindedly brushed her bangs back and rubbed small circles against her scalp. From the other room came the low hum of the girls' voices as they helped each other wiggle free of dresses with too many zippers and clasps. Danny wasn't paying much attention until Jazz's voice rose above the others. "So what were you and Cassandra talking about in whatever form of body language conversation you were having?" Danny froze, ears pricking. Danny's answer came without hesitation. "Oh, she asked what I liked about Danny." Danny's face heated instantly. Oh no. No. Danny didn't miss a beat. "And what did you say?" "I like his tight little butt." "Sam!" Jazz's tone wobbled between horrified and helplessly amused. Danny slapped a hand over his face. His ears were burning. "What? It's true," Sam said, utterly unbothered. "She thought it was funny." Danny ground into his palm. "Why am I listening to this? Why can't the floor just open up and swallow me whole?" Jazz sputtered. "God, what did she even say to that?" "She made recommendations," Sam replied, with the air of someone delivering a research finding. "She referred me to Dick and Jason for my viewing pleasure. It'd be weird, but I think half of Bruce's kids are adopted. Almost nobody is a Wayne." This time there was no shriek of disgust from Jazz. Instead, Danny caught the unmistakable sound of her trying not to laugh, and then failing. "True," Jazz admitted between chuckles. "Those men were pretty caked up." Danny's ears went scarlet. He stared at the ceiling like it had betrayed him personally. His blush deepened until he thought he might ignite, because, well, yeah, he remembered, back before all this, before he even knew the Waynes were his family, he had noticed. Dick Grayson wasn't just objectively attractive. He'd been one of Danny's earliest wait, why am I staring at the sky moments, a safe distant crush. I reminded that maybe girls weren't the only people he liked, that Sam wasn't the only, and hearing Jazz say it out loud made it impossible not to admit it to himself. He was bisexual. He had always been. But now it was weird, because Dick wasn't just some impossibly handsome stranger in the tabloids anymore. He was his uncle. Then he groaned and buried his face in his free hand. Why does life have to make everything more complicated? And the worst part? He couldn't even deny it. Dick Grayson was partially famous for it. The man had sexiest man alive titles stacked like trading cards, and if the tabloids were even half right, half the country agreed. And Danny had to admit that Dick Grayson at least was absolutely blessed with almost too much cake for one man. It's no wonder he caught Starfire's eye. Danny shook that thought out of his head and distracted himself by massaging Danny's head. It was too weird to think of the man like now that he knew he was his uncle. He shook his head hard, banishing the thought before it spiraled. Much safer to focus on Danny, asleep across his lap, her cool little head against his stomach. Safer to think about being here with family than about the cake he was definitely never going to comment on out loud. He looked down at Danny and said, her face slacked with sleep, and resumed massaging her scalp with a sigh. Much safer ground. Wayne Manor had gone still again. The dining room chatter had faded into the night, and the dishes carried away, the laughter of children and cousins, echoing faintly in memory. In the master suit, Bruce sat properly against the headboard, a book half open on his lap. Selina curled beside him, silk robe draped across her shoulders, her glass of wine balanced delicately between her fingers. She broke the silence first. So, she said, drawing out the word, your grandson. Bruce closed the book, setting it on the nightstand. Danny, Selina smiled faintly. He is not what I expected. Bruce's mouth twitched. Not what you expected, how? Well, she said, swirling her glass. When Tim first told me about him, I thought of another version of Tim. Head down, calculating, halfway to brooding already. But Danny, he's nothing like that. He's brighter, not naive, just open. He looks at people like he still expects the best from them. Bruce's brow furrowed slightly. You think that's a weakness? Selina shook her head. No, I think it's rare, especially in this family. Bruce leaned back, considering. Danny had been quiet at first, clearly overwhelmed by the scale of the table, the weight of eyes on him. But then Danny had laughed at something Jason said, and Danny had relaxed, protective, but playful. Not a Wayne by blood, but still carrying something of the family in the way he deflected attention from himself, the way he made space for others. He has Tim's eyes, Bruce said, at least, but Stephanie's manner, it's a good mix. Selina hummed in agreement. He will need it, if he is going to survive all this. She shifted, resting her glass on the nightstand. What about Danny, the little one? She refrained from saying great-granddaughter. Thinking about it already made her feel old. Bruce's features softened almost imperceptibly. She is spirited. That's one word for it. Selina teased. She nearly out-argued Jason. I like her. She's protective of her father, Bruce observed, and he of her. That bond is strong. whatever their history is, they've been through enough together to know how to lean on each other. Selina smiled, remembering the way Danny had clung to Danny's arm at the start of dinner, then slowly let go once she realized the table wasn't hostile. She will be a handful, but the good kind. Selina aged an eyebrow. And how do you feel about Samantha? It's quite a pairing. Bruce's mouth tightened. The Manson family has history. Selina's smirk deepened. Fundraisers, galas, political campaigns. I remember her parents, bubbly, but very stiff. Very loud about how much money they have given to the city. Appearances matter to them, Bruce said flatly. But not to her, Selina countered. She's sharp-tongued, but the kind of sharp that comes from conviction, not ego. She knows how to hold her own ground. Reminds me of her grandmother. I like her better than I ever liked her parents. Bruce considered this, then gave the smallest of nods. She cares for Danny. That much was obvious. Not subtle, was it? Selina teased. Bruce didn't rise to the bait. Good. He will need someone like Dad when the press catches wind of all this. Someone who won't flinch. For a while, silence settled again. The city hummed faintly outside the window, a distant heartbeat against the quiet of the manor. Selina curled closer, resting her head against Bruce's shoulder. You know, she muttered, for all your brooding, you didn't look so grim tonight. Seeing them at the table, Bruce's jaw worked. The thought of Danny laughing quietly when Danny spilled her juice, of Jazz politely correcting Jason's Gotham trivia, of Sam daring Stephanie to eat a pepper that had Alfred raising his eyebrow. It had been messy, noisy, imperfect, but it had felt like family. It was good, Bruce admitted softly. Selina smiled against him, eyes already closing. Then let's hold on to that, just for tonight. Bruce let out a long breath, resting his chin lightly against her hair. Just for tonight. And that was the chapter! I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you like my videos in general, feel free to subscribe. And there's a bell if you want to get notified. Someone in the comments said that I should tell you guys again. I did this once in another chapter of this podfic, that this story was written with the help of AI, and it was something that for me does not really matter about the story actually. Like, I myself don't use AI for my stories, but that doesn't mean that I'm AI is a strange topic. AI is a strange topic for me. On one side, it's fine. On the other side, it's like, meh. But at the end, it's just a tool, right? So, I don't know. Some people are miffy about it, and the commenter definitely probably was miffy about it. At least that's how it came over to me. I will probably not name their name, but it happened. It happened. And my point is here. I care about stories in general. It does not really matter for me if they're made with AI or without. As long as the story is good, it's a good story. That's what I stand by. I do Podfic commissions, so if you want to support me or the likes or get early access to my Discord server, you can look in the channel description and text me over Discord or Tumblr, and then we can arrange which kind of story you want me to read, either your own written or someone else's written story. Just let me know. Also some random thing. It does not need to be posted on my channel, so if you want to also have a private podfic, that's also completely fine. But that was it for me for now. So enjoy the rest of your time and see you next time.